In the listening section, students listen to passages via a headset. The kinds of text types that they listen to are lecture passages, which may be monologic or involve some interaction, but they also can include short dialogues. It might be two people discussing a problem, or a service encounter at a university, for example, a student talking to a librarian. Now, in this section of the test, what happens is the students listen, they take notes, and then they answer the question from the notes. So they don't see the questions prior to the listening. They listen, then they take the notes, and then, as I said, they answer the questions. Some of those questions might be, again, they might have to select more than one response. But in order to do that, so for example, they might have to choose 2 out of 4, and that total question is worth 1 point. In this part of the test, they can't skip any questions and go back. The question types, again, their main idea, gist, understanding the speaker's attitude. Those questions are listening for pragmatic understanding, what the speaker means when he says something and or she says something. Now, in those questions, what happens is the test taker will actually hear that section of the test, the section of the listening task again. So, for example, what did the lecturer mean when he said, and that excerpt of the lecture will be played, and then they will have to choose the correct response from that. I'm just wondering if we have any questions so far.
No.
No?
There was one question that I've responded to privately. Yeah, but that's it.
Okay, all right.
And you could try moving the slides again if you like.
Okay, we'll see how we go. Okay, is it back over to me?
Yes.
Oh, there you go, it's working now.
Okay, great.
Great. The speaking section of the test, again, students are wearing a headset with a microphone. There are 6 questions, and this section of the test takes 20 minutes. So the 6 questions, the test taker will have to respond in between 45 seconds or 60 seconds. So, for example, there are 2 independent questions, and it might be give an opinion about a topic. And again, it's related to life on a university campus or a higher education campus or something related to that. So they would be given 15 seconds to prepare their response, and then they would speak into the microphone, and that response is recorded. When the 45 seconds is up, then it stops recording. With the integrated questions, they would, the test takers might be asked to read a short passage and then listen to a short conversation or a short lecture and then summarise or understand what the problem is and express an opinion about a possible solution. So, for example, a student might talk about, it's mid-semester break, so we've got lots of students at the moment trying to catch up on assignments. So student not being able to get their time organised, and they're talking to a friend about it, and that friend will make some solutions. So make some suggestion about possible solutions. So the test taker will need to summarise what they heard and say what they think is the best solution. So they're the kind of questions. So it not only requires them to be able to speak fluently, but it also requires them to be able to answer what the question is actually asking. So in terms of the rating, they're rated on the content that they are on task and the development of how they've developed the topic. So in the integrated questions, they need to have good listening and note-taking and reading and note-taking skills as well. So that's just a little example of the kinds of things that make it a little bit different in terms of being an independent task and an integrated task. And those kind of responses are a little bit harder for students or test takers to memorise a response to because they don't know what the prompts are going to be. So that's the speaking section of the test. It's actually rated on a scoring rubric out of a total of a possible 4, and the scoring rubric is available on the ETS website, or if someone would like a copy of it, I'm happy to send it to them. There's no public or private version. That's the same for both for the test, for the raters as well as the test takers. There's just one version of that. It seems to have decided not to work again. All right. With the writing section of the test, I said earlier that there is an integrated question and there's also an independent question. So what happens in the integrated task, the test takers have 20 minutes. You can tell I'm a teacher. I keep referring to them as students, not test takers. What happens with the integrated question is that the test taker sees a short prompt reading text, so about 300 words. They have 3 minutes to read and take notes. Then that disappears. Then they hear a lecture that is about 2 minutes on the same topic but from a different perspective, and they listen and take notes. Then what they're required to do is summarise what they've heard in the lecture and show how it adds to, differs from, contradicts what they've read. So for that task, they need to have good reading and note-taking and listening and note-taking skills. They're also required to synthesise, to not plagiarise, and be able to summarise what they've heard in a succinct way. There's no maximum or minimum word requirement. There is a suggested word length of between 150 and 225 words. But as I said, they have 20 minutes to do that. And in that task, the raters are looking also for accuracy of content. It doesn't require opinion. It requires the ability to find the key points and to summarise and show the difference between the two prompts, the reading and the listening. The independent is that there is 30 minutes to complete that, and basically it's an argue essay. So with the scoring for both the speaking and the writing, it's a holistic score. So if you see the rubrics, you can see how what is looked at is the test taker's writing is judged and speaking is judged in a holistic way. Okay. There was something else I was going to say then, but I can't remember what that was, so I'll move right along. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about scoring now. I said earlier, each section has a scaled score from 0 to 30, and the total score is basically, it's out of 120. That's all quite self-explanatory there. What happens in terms of rating is that for the speaking and writing, there are raters that rate those things, but you either become a speaking rater or a writing rater. You don't rate for both. And what happens is raters rate online, so the scoring is separate from the testing site. So the students' test papers, well, they're not papers, but the students' test digital files are sent back to ETS, where they're marked by raters. For each 6 to 10 raters, there's a scoring leader, and the scoring leader monitors the raters live in real time. And for the speaking, there are 3 to 6 raters for speaking responses. So one test taker's speaking results is made up of 3 to 6 raters' responses. With writing, it says there are 4 ratings for writing responses. 2 of those are rated by humans, and two are rated by an E-rater. Now the E-rater can rate for linguistic features, but obviously there are lots of things that it can't do, but it provides an extra layer of support there. So for example, for writing, if the rating of a particular rater is quite different to the rating of the E-rater, that would flag an alert for a scoring leader to rate it. Also, what happens with the raters is, in the second point there, it says daily calibration for speaking and writing raters. Every time a rater sits down to rate, they have to first pass a calibration test. So they listen to some benchmarks if it's speaking, and then they do a mini test, so that where they have to rate a number of responses, they have to pass that in order to rate for that day. If they take a break and come back, again, they need to do a calibration again. With the writing, the same thing happens. For the integrated writing task, they see benchmarks on the actual task that they're rating, and then they're calibrated against that particular task. So if someone's rating the integrated writing task, that's generally the only task that they'll be rating for that day. The raters also have no information about the test takers. They just have whatever the ID is on the files that they're working with. And they see responses from a range of countries. With the scores, in Australia, TOEFL is accepted for university entry. Different, as you know, if you look on any university website at the English language entry requirements, there are quite extensive entry requirements for the range of tests that are used. The universities do set their own requirements, and usually they're related to equivalences. One of the pre-reading documents that I sent was how a research article about equivalences between IELTS and TOEFL. The reason I sent that was because in Australia, the language we usually talk about proficiency is IELTS, so that it makes sense for you to have some extra information about where IELTS and TOEFL sit together. As you know, in any proficiency test, there is no passing or failing score, despite what students may think. And the scores are ready online in 10 days. This is a sample of an institution score report. The test takers actually receive a different kind of score report in addition, which gives them performance feedback. So it gives some tips about where they might have fallen down in a particular skill area and some suggestions about how they might improve that particular skill area. So institutions, obviously, they mainly want the score, so that's what this institution score report looks like. Again, if you're interested in the kind of information that students also receive, that is available on the ETS website, or again, I'm happy to send that to you. Just moving to some frequently asked questions. Again, with students, some of them may not be aware that they can use TOEFL scores to study in Australia. As the answer says there, that TOEFL scores are accepted by immigration for student visas, and they have been accepted by universities. A different range of TOEFL scores have been accepted by universities for over 45 years. And again, if you look at a website for a university or higher education institution, you'll see a range of TOEFL scores, including the computer and paper-based tests. But the majority of students that are hoping to use a TOEFL score should be coming with a TOEFL iBTO score. As of late last year, TOEFL scores are also accepted for the visas that are outlined below, so a wider range of visas. They're not yet accepted for 457 visa. That's because the 457 visa program is still under review. Well, it wasn't under review. The review was finished, but then things have changed, and they still haven't finished that review. The TOEFL test, the way that you register for the TOEFL test, it doesn't actually need two those, but is online. When you register online, what will come up is a city, but when a student actually creates their own login and registration ID, they will, if they say, for example, they want to do a test in Sydney, once they've registered and said that they want to do a test, they'll get a drop-down menu of the various test centres, so they can actually select which test centre they want to go to. They don't actually get randomly allocated to test centres. The students actually choose the test centre that they would like to attend. And as a teacher, if a teacher is trying to help a student with registration, the easiest way to understand it is actually register yourself an account and just step through the process. It doesn't mean you actually have to go and do a test, but it's probably the easiest way to show a student how to do the registration process. On the test day, there is a video that actually explains what will happen on a test day. It's a 7-minute video, so we're definitely not going to watch that right now. Basically what happens is the test takers turn up on the day. They have to have sufficient ID as required in Australia. They also have a photo taken. And because of security issues and because it's a high-stake language test, as with other tests, there are a range of security protocols in place, one of which includes electric wanding to make sure that students don't have recording devices on them. They also have to give a handwriting sample and a speech sample, and the centre has videos, and there are a range of other security procedures that are in place. As I said, they're given scratch paper to write on. Obviously, they can't leave with that. If you want more details about the test day, the video is probably the easiest way to find out about that. We talked about this a little bit before, how the students actually get their results. The scores are posted online through the registration portal. They can get one paper test report. They can download a PDF of their score reports, and they can get 4 official score reports for institutions, which are actually sent directly to the institutions from ETS, so the institutions know that they're actually genuine reports, so they select the institutions that they would like their reports sent to. A test taker can effectively do a test as many times as they would like, which is not something that obviously you would want them to do, but there is a 12-day gap minimum, but again, you wouldn't want a student to be signing up for a huge amount of tests. You would hope that they would be sitting a test when they're ready. Oops, jumped one. The test is a measure of whether a student is ready for academic studies at university. So there are no specific subjects that students have to have prior knowledge of. the test is designed to assess English skill, not subject knowledge. So if a passage includes specialised vocabulary, they'll actually be either defined in the text or occasionally there might be a gloss. Going back to the research that I talked about earlier, the kinds of subject areas are based on the research that they did then. So there is a mixture of social sciences, humanities, and some science subjects as well. But it's general knowledge, and if you're looking at it from an Australian context, it would be the kind of general knowledge that a student completing senior school would have. There is typing required in the writing part of the test. Obviously, test takers need to be familiar with the standard QWERTY keyboard, but they don't need to be able to type rapidly. There should be enough time for them to complete the writing task. But again, it's a skill that's required for further studies if students are planning to undertake further studies. So it's a skill that it's useful for students to have. So obviously they do need to be able to have some degree of typing ability. When we talked about the speaking section of the test, you'll notice that the preparation time was between 15 or 20 seconds. That time doesn't include when if a test taker has to read and listen, that's not included in that preparation time, that's separate. But the idea was, one of the things that they did was they were speaking to academics about the amount of time that they would wait to get a response from students. And in a real life situation, even waiting 5 seconds can be rather a long amount of time. So 15 to 20 seconds is a reasonable amount of time for testing purposes. ETS, Educational Testing Services, is an American company, and a lot of, when I've delivered workshops, a lot of teachers have asked, is it an American test only? Is it only, are there only American accents? Is the content only American? And as you can see, recently, ETS has started incorporating different accents into other, into the listening and speaking parts of the test. So as you can see on the screen, there are a number of countries that they've included, including Australia. So that is still very much a process, and it's the same with the actual reading and the actual text content. They're sourcing material from a range of countries, not just the US. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the tips for teachers. I'm just going to, because I want to go on and look at the resources because they relate to that. But as I said right at the beginning, sitting behind the test are a number of learning objectives for each section of the test. And when you look at those learning objectives, they are very similar to an English for Academic Preparation course or a direct entry program. So if that's what you're teaching, those are the skills that test takers require in order to do well on the test. So a student doesn't necessarily need to do a test prep course, although they'll probably want to do a test prep course, but giving them practice in the kinds of things that you do in an EAP course is actually preparing them for the test. So therefore, the kind of activities that are suggested are skill building activities and integrated skill activities, which are, again, the kind of things that teachers do in EAP and direct entry programs. So there's a couple of integrated skill activities suggested there. And yeah, so I don't want to spend too much on that because I know that teachers who teach EAP know very well how to do the preparation that's required to get students ready for university and further study. Again, all of those skills are skills that are taught in an EAP or direct entry program, and they are the kinds of skills that are being tested in the TOEFL test. I actually do a workshop which is a half day, which involves a lot of activities of how to prepare lessons to teach those kinds of activities. But again, as I said, EAP or direct entry kind of classes, you're preparing students to take the TOEFL test. The only other thing, if you had a student that was specifically wanting to sit that test, would be to give them some understanding of the test structure. So, which is what is talked about on the next slide, getting the students to become familiar with the format, tasks and scoring rubrics. This is all common sense that we would do with any test that we're preparing students for. As I said, with the performance feedback, there is actually a document that describes performance levels it basically describes the kind of performance feedback that students can be given, and that can help students work out what areas and what things they need to do in order to improve those particular areas. The resources that I'm just going to talk about here, basically there are a range of free resources, and they're useful regardless of whether it's test preparation or any preparation. My logic is that if a testing company has put a lot of time and effort into preparing practice test materials or other materials, they can be adapted for a range of purposes, not necessarily just for a specific test. So the resources that we're going to look at here is resources that are here available for students, also for institutional information as well. The site that you can see at the moment is basically probably the easiest starting point for students, and if you are preparing students to do TOEFL tests, it's a very good place for teachers as well. If you look at the across the top of the screenshot of the website, there's links to what the TOEFL test is, the basics of the test, what resources there are. The practice section again introduces and provides links to a range of test practice materials, including free practice as well. The plan is a guide for students to organise their time and get ready for the test. Connect talks about and introduces the students to different ways of accessing social media related to TOEFL. TOEFL, like everybody, has Instagram, YouTube, etc. There's also little tutorial sites where they can see little video clips of study groups and those kinds of things, and news is obviously self-explanatory. For a student trying to work out what institution accepts TOEFL scores, TOEFL destination search is useful. It's also useful for an institution if you're not sure that you're one of those institutions. So this TOEFL destination search, which again is part of that TOEFL Go Anywhere website, will show students where they can go with a TOEFL score. The YouTube channel has a range of things. If you look at the third dot point, there's a video called Inside the TOEFL Test, and it gives a really good snapshot of the speaking and writing tests. So, and they're not particularly long. So if you find it easier I find it easier to watch things rather than to sit down and read them. It will give a really good overview of what is in the speaking and the writing tests. So that's actually a useful starting point if you, for both, either for a teacher or for students, in terms of understanding what is required in the speaking and writing sections of the test. And there's also Meet the Study Group as well. So that's just more detail about what it actually is included there. And again, it's a resource that's free and gives students some ideas of what is required in that part of the test. Test preparation, the best part about these resources are the free resources, obviously, that I'm not going to show. Obviously, the presentation is getting tired at this time of day. Oh, there we go. The things that are on this page are all free. The TOEFL planner, the image that you can see on my lower right as I'm facing the screen, has it's a free downloadable PDF that has tips for preparing for different parts of the test. It has the scoring rubric. It also has sample test scores, so a student can see what the test scoring is like. It also has an 8-week plan of how to prepare for the test. So if you were doing preparation for a part-time course or something like that, it provides a very good outline for preparing a part-time prep course. The quick prep that you can see sitting behind that, there are 4 volumes of quick prep, and they're basically retired tests, and again, they're PDFs, and they have links to the audio as well. So again, that's a free resource that students who are looking at maybe doing the TOEFL test, I would start with those kinds of things. On this page are things that are available at a cost. The official guide to the TOEFL test, which is a rather weighty tome, that can actually be purchased as an electronic copy. Then there's practice tests with audio, and there's a very small screenshot down the bottom of the page that says TOEFL Practice Online. There is a cost to this particular practice test, but what it does, I actually did it and I passed, which was good, even though you can't pass or fail. You can take the test under test conditions or in untimed mode, and the cost is about $45 US. And what happens is you get a score report with feedback. The speaking and writing are rated only by E-raters, but it gives, if a student's thinking about doing a test, it's a much cheaper option of trying to see where their score is, rather than signing up to do a test and then finding out that they're not ready. And then there's other resources that are available at a cost. So that's the test that I was just talking about. There's an online prep course that is available. Again, that's available at a cost to either the institution or to students. Finally, at the beginning, Sophie spoke about my role. I work as an English language consultant for ETS around the TOEFL test, and basically my role with TOEFL is to do workshops to support teachers and institutions. As it says in the big print at the top, the workshops are always free, and they can be related to test preparation, but they also, a lot of the things that are involved in them are applicable to any language classroom. So the first dot point there says Propel Workshop. Basically, that's a workshop that gives detailed overview of the test, practicing rating the test, trialling some of the different parts of the test, but then more importantly, looking at how the learning objectives that sit behind the test can be incorporated into teaching practice. And I have also am available to do workshops for institutions. So I have, it's now 10 to 5, and I've pretty much covered all of the things that I would like to have covered in the session. So if anyone does have any questions that they would like to ask, if you would like to type them to Sophie, and I'm happy to answer them. And as I said, if there's anything you would like further information on, you can either contact me at the email there or contact Sophie, and she will pass the information on to me. So for example, if you are interested in the TOEFL planner, which as I said is a free downloadable PDF, and you can't find it, I usually, with ETS things, I usually Google things because it's quite a rich and deep website. But if there's something that you are looking for and you can't easily find, if you just let me know, I'm quite happy to send you a copy. So that's me, Sophie.
We've got a question for you,
Yes,
Kath.
sure.
It's from Dominique. How does TOEFL compare to IELTS, and do you think it will pick up in popularity?
Okay. It's comparing different tests is like comparing apples and oranges, I think, and I guess the test specifications are quite different, and the scoring is also quite different. The scoring for the constructed responses, so the speaking and writing sections, is a holistic score. So if you actually look at the scoring rubric, if you are familiar with the IELTS, I can't remember what the IELTS descriptors.
Yeah,
so I've lost the terminology. You really can't compare the two. So for example, so for speaking and writing, there's actually a rubric for independent tasks, and there's also a separate rubric for the integrated tasks, because the integrated tasks are looking at accuracy of content as well. One thing that I didn't mention in the writing is that with the writing, they're looking at the concept of a good first draft. So, and again, if you look at the scoring rubric, the top level for and I'm not comparing that to IELTS. And I guess it's a difficult question because they're quite different. In terms of popularity, in Australia, I think now students have the option of undertaking one of 4 tests, either IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge or Pearson's. With students, often the way I think there will be, there is starting to be some growth in TOEFL, but I think it will take some time as well because it is quite new in Australia, not so much for student visas, but you know, it's taking some time, and generally what happens is that students want to do a preparation course, so they'll look for a college that has a preparation course, and often you know, in Australia there's not a huge amount of TOEFL preparation courses that are happening. So that was a very sort of roundabout way of hopefully answering your question.
Okay. There's a couple of questions which are quite similar from Hussein and from Dominique about the waiting period between each test for students who don't achieve their score that they need. So what's the waiting period and how many times can a student take the test?
Well, there's a waiting period of 12 days and technically speaking there's no limit, but you really wouldn't want, you know, you would really hope that students aren't going to sit multiple tests. And I think that was why one of the things that I was suggesting was the practice test. It's a much cheaper option, you know, if a student thinks they're ready to do a test, rather than paying to do a test straight up. If they do the practice test to see where they are and to familiarise themselves with the test structure. Yes, so I guess like any teacher, you would really hope that students wouldn't be lining up for a whole bunch of tests. And now that there are 4 tests, I would hope that students wouldn't be lining up for one of each, hoping and then seeing which one might be the best one for them.
Okay.
But we can't control the students.
No, exactly. There's another question about the cost in Australia of the test. Can you hear me, Kath?
Are you talking?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, there, I just lost you for a minute. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So how much does the test cost in Australia
it's,
now?
$300.
Okay, $300. All right. Any other questions? That was the last one on the list. Or any comments for Catherine? No, I think that's probably it. No more questions are coming up. Okay. So did you want to say anything else?
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I know it's a little bit, well, it's a little bit more challenging when you're on a webinar and you can't actually see the person presenting. So I hope there has been some useful information for you. And as I said, if there's something that you have a question about that I haven't covered, or there's any more information you'd like about anything, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'd just like to thank you again, Catherine, and also ETS TOEFL for sponsoring today's session.
It's our pleasure.
And there are some comments coming up saying thank you. So,
well, thank you everyone for your attendance late on a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah. All right. Well, a very useful info. Great.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. And yeah, please feel free to email either me, Sophie, or Catherine. Okay. So we might switch off now.
Great.